First, we're going to start off in Genesis 1:14, and we'll see what the stars are for and the luminaries. In Genesis 1:14, it is written, "And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons." This is the Hebrew word moed, and for days and for years. Actually, the word for signs here is ot. The Hebrew word ot, spelled O-T-H. And that's the same word we find in Job. We find the word Mazzaroth, or Mazzaroth, and that means constellation signs. So the stars are for signs. That's what they're for. That's one of the reasons they're, and for seasons, and for days, and for years. And these seasons are seasons of for a certain prophecy, and they're also about the feast, Yahweh's feast of Passover, the Pentecost, and tabernacles. They're all about the feast. And the moon sets forth when the feast and the years begin. But the other ones I said, they are for signs. They're not for astrological signs about our lives, but they're for his signs. And all that is written in the heavens with his signs is about his salvation plan, his Yeshua. Yeshua is salvation in Hebrew, who's came through his son, Yahshua, or Jesus. That's all about him and his first appearing and second appearing, and about his people. It's about us, those who believe in him. It's about Israel, the 12 tribes, all the faithful of Israel. Now, throughout time, these pictures go back at least 6,000 years. Now, when we see the stars, sometimes we don't see pictures up there, but most likely these pictures are handed down from Yahweh himself, from the Almighty. He gave the pictures. Some of the star names and their meanings means like head of woman, foot of woman, etc. So you can tell where these pictures are supposed to go. It's up to the man's discretion to how he puts a woman up there, what she looks like. But in fact, I was doing a teaching down in California one time. It was at a planetarium, and I was teaching on Bethulah, the virgin, and also the serpent. And they brought the pictures up, and they had Bethulah as a girl in a bikini, and a snake looking at her with her tongue hanging out. I mean, that's not the picture I wanted there, but I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't know until I got there. It's kind of a strange thing, but there's still the woman is still there. The foot's in the right place, the head's in the right place. And what the ancient civilizations did as time went on, they perverted these constellations. The constellations are about the one who's going to come and destroy the evil one. This is out of Genesis 3:15. And what they did is they took it and brought it to their own gods. They made their own gods out of them. And like Nimrod said he was the Messiah, and he wasn't. They were saying he was the right one. So through time, and the Greeks made their false deities from these constellations. The Egyptians made their false deities, Romans the same, and they named them according to their false deities. So they perverted what Yahweh had set forth. But they are for his signs. That's what the scriptures say. In Psalms 19, 1 through 3, it is written, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard." So day unto day they utter speech, and night unto night they show knowledge. So there is knowledge from these heavens. They're showing knowledge. They're witnessing to the coming Messiah, and they're telling the story. And there's also certain times, there are certain events happening in these constellations. There's certain major prophetic events. There are certain signs that go on in these constellations. So they're showing forth knowledge. And there's no speech nor language if their voice is not heard. In the ancient times, most people were familiar with the stars and the pictures that go with them. And a picture tells 1,000 words. You don't need a language to describe it. You know, they see a woman, it's a woman, and various things. You see a dragon getting his head trampled on, it's the dragon getting his head trampled on, you know. So so there's no speech or language if their voice is not heard. It's heard throughout all the languages throughout the planet. And as is written in Romans, that no one has an excuse because these are things that Yahweh shows people day unto day in his creation. This is part of the creation that shows these things forth. In Psalms 147:4, it is written, "He determines the number of stars and calls them each by name." Speaking of Yahweh Elohim, he named the stars. Adam didn't name the stars. No, man didn't name the stars. Yahweh, the Almighty, named the stars. And all these star names have prophetic meanings to them. And we can go back to the ancient Hebrew roots, and even in the languages that came after in the ancient civilizations, they all go back to the same meanings of these stars. Even though they have a different name because of for their language, they still have the same meaning as the Hebrew root word does. So he determines the stars and he named them. And they have prophetic meanings. So you can tell many times if there's a constellation that just doesn't seem right, you can go to the star names and find out what that constellation is about, what it means. I'll show you this as we get into it. Now this is a picture of the Mazzaroth, or the Mazzaroth, and there are 48 constellations in the Mazzaroth, and we're going to be looking at all 48 of them in this session. We're going to be going through all 48 constellations. But this line here, the circle, the double line, the heavy circle there, is the ecliptic. And that is the path that the sun follows through the 12 signs. It moves around, where's the mouse here? It moves around this circle through the 12 signs. There's the lion and the woman, the scales, the Libra, the scorpion, the Sagittarius. It moves through the 12 major constellations on this circle. And it's also called the Zodiac. These 12 signs are called the Zodiac. Zodiac simply means the path or way. This is the path or the way that the sun follows through these constellations. We sort of get a negative connotation on the Zodiac these days because what astrology has done, and we hear the word Zodiac, all of a sudden our hairs go up on that, just between me anyway. But there's a major difference between biblical astronomy and astrology, as I mentioned earlier. In astrology, most of the focus is on ourselves, of we should get up at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, or about our love life or whatever, you know, and what sign were we born under. It has nothing to do with that. That puts the focus on us. The focus in biblical astronomy is on the Messiah. All the focus is on him. When the adversary gets us worshiping ourselves, we're actually worshiping him. It's all about the Messiah. The stars are not to be worshipped. These are telling a story. Just like the words in the scripture are not to be worshipped, but the author is to be worshipped. Same thing with the stars. We are not to worship the stars. We worship the one who wrote them in the heavens. He's the one that put these pictures here. He's the one that, this is like another witness to what his plans are, what his plans of salvation are. It's another witness to his word. And the written word always complements the heavenly word, and the heavenly word always complements the earthly word, or the written word in the scriptures. They never contradict one another. If you see a contradiction there, you either got the wrong interpretation on the scriptures or you got the wrong interpretation in the heavens. They always are together. The second circle up here, the small dotted line, is the celestial equator. That's like the Earth's equator projected into the heavens from the Earth. And this is the center, where we have the North Star. This is towards the center of the heavens. And here we have the king on a throne. That's where the king is. That's what represents Messiah is reigning in the heavens. And next to him is Cassiopeia, who is the bride. So we have them right in the center of the heavens. And here's the woman of Bethulah. We're getting into her later on. But then here is the serpent. And here we go back to Genesis 3:15, where Yahweh says, I'll put enmity between you and your seed, and the serpent's seed. And this is the pictures that sort of portray that. You see the serpent here and the woman. And the constellations start here. This is where it starts with Bethulah, because this is the main, each of these constellations have a main theme to them, each of the signs. The main theme for Bethulah is on the birth of Messiah, or the promised seed of the woman. So that's the main theme of Bethulah. This is also known as Virgo. The lion, Leo, or Uriah in the Hebrew, its main focus is on Messiah, the king of Judah, but the main focus on this one, the main meaning, is him destroying the serpent. This is after the millennial reign of Messiah, where the serpent is finally destroyed completely. So you see the beginning where he's born, and you go around where he's crucified in these constellations, and then these constellations up in here talk about when he comes back in Revelation 20. Then we come around to here, where the serpent is finally destroyed. So it tells the whole story in the circle. Now astrology has the zodiac beginning in Aries and ending in Pisces. That's because that's where the vernal equinox was about 500 BC when they started the zodiac. But they were going after the sun god. The actual beginning of this is, I'll show you in a little while, another confirmation of this is so in a little bit. But here's another constellation I call the Genesis 3:15, the struggle between the woman's seed and the serpent's seed. It's Ophiuchus. He's struggling with the serpent. I'll be showing close-ups on these in a little bit. Now, this is from the ancient temple of Esna, and in Egypt. And it shows here the lion. And this is their rendition of Bethulah at the time. And here they put them both together as the Sphinx. This is the head is the woman, and the tail is a lion. This shows where the constellations begin and where the constellations end. This side, the Sphinx goes back a long ways, but this is how they put where the constellations began, where they started, and they go all the way around, and they end in the lion. This tells the whole story of the Messiah, the coming one. They perverted things a bit, but you can still see the truth behind some of these perversions. This is a large picture of Bethulah, or Virgo, and she's also the the tribes of Israel. There's 12 tribes, and each tribe has actually an oath on their, when they were encamped in the wilderness. They had a flag with an oath, a sign on each flag representing the Father's house, and they represent also each tribe is represented by one of the constellation signs in the heavens. And so this is the sign for the tribe of Zebulun. I'm not going to get into that teaching today. I have a whole teaching on that, on the 12 tribes and the 12 signs. This is very good. It goes back and discusses this to great detail. I'm not going to get into that in this teaching. But I'll tell you which signs they belong to as you go through them. But the word here for this, she's the promised seed of the woman. That's the main theme. And in her hand, she's holding a sheaf of wheat. And the word is Zemek, or El-Zamak in the Arabic, or Zemek in the Hebrew. For this star, we call it by Spica today. That's a Greek name, Spica, but in the ancient name, and the Hebrew name is Zemek. And it's used exclusively of the Messiah in all 5 usages of the branch in the Bible. In Isaiah 4:2, in Jeremiah 23:5, and 33:15, in Zechariah 3:8, and 6:12, you will see this word branch, and it's called Zemek, and it's used of the Messiah. So this represents the Messiah as the branch who is coming, the promised seed of the woman. Zemek, the branch. Now up here is we have Vidameatrix, or Meridian, and that means the son or branch who cometh. That's what this star means here. And it is written in Zechariah 6:12-13, and speak unto him, saying, Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, Behold, the man whose name is the branch, it's capitalized in the King James like this, and he shall grow up out of a place, and he shall build a temple of the Lord. Even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne. And the counsel of peace shall be between them both. This is speaking about the branch of the coming Messiah, and this is what is shown in the constellation Bethulah. Now, we were working on getting these in more of a Hebrew flavor, and a lot of the constellations we have, pretty much 90%, they're okay, but some of them, they're the wrong pictures. They're not the most ancient pictures, and they have some wrong stuff there. And so we're attempting to do these right, doing the best we can on it. A good friend of mine, Michelle Abraham, she's an artist. She lives in Cleveland, Ohio, and she is painting these, doing all these constellations over, giving them a Hebrew flavor. Now this is what she has. This is a rough draft she sent me through email, so it's not. So the colors will look a little bit off here. They actually look different than they show on my screen here. But this is basically the rough draft of what she has painted so far in Bethulah, and she puts here a stone. This is the color of the tribe of Zebulun. But you see, she's holding a sheaf of wheat, and she's holding the green branch here. Now, what's interesting about Bethulah is that she represents the feast of the Lord, the feast of Yahweh. When you go into the feast of Passover, the feast of Pentecost, and the feast of Tabernacles, they are all agricultural feasts. And if you ever go on to a Messianic fellowship where they do the Passover, they do the Tabernacles, they always have this green branch they're holding in their hands. This is interesting. This has been done for thousands of years. And so she represents also the 12 faithful tribes of Israel. This is what Bethulah represents. The faithful of Israel, the 12 tribes. Because she has the 12, in Revelations it mentions she has the 12 stars above her head. It's actually the 12 constellations are above her head, and she is the 12th. But she represents the 12 tribes of Israel. And which is interesting about Bethulah, this is a scene from Jerusalem, actually. This is at 10 minutes after sunset on April 1st. This is around the time of the Feast of of Passover and leavened bread, where we have the barley wave offering, etc. And she's rising in the sky. She's rising above the eastern horizon. And this is about an hour after sunset. So in the early evening sky, this is where she's rising. You see her rising in the sky. This is around the time of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then an hour after sunset on June 1st, this is around the time of Pentecost, she's at her highest in the sky. And the Feast of Unleavened Bread, you have the barley. And then at the Feast of Pentecost, you have the wheat harvest. This is the first of the wheat harvest is coming in. And she's holding the sheaf of wheat. She's highest in the sky here. This is in the evening sky for everybody to see her. And then this is 10 minutes after sunset on October 1st, around the time of Tabernacles. She is setting in the west. So then after October, November, she goes down below the horizon, and she's not seen again in the early evening sky until Passover again. And she's describing all the feast. And you see a great shadow picture of Bethulah when you go to the book of Ruth. Remember, Ruth was married to Boaz. And when she came to Bethlehem, she went to Boaz's field. And this is at Passover because she was harvesting the barley. And then she was there also at Pentecost harvesting the wheat. And then later on at Tabernacles, the later harvest. And that's when her and Boaz became married, husband and wife. And she was a Gentile. It's a foreshadow of the Messiah with his church, with his believers. And she was a Gentile. And they were actually both ancestors, direct ancestors to the Messiah. So you see a shadow picture there of Ruth in this picture. And she's a shadow picture of the faithful of Israel. So this is interesting stuff with Bethulah. And here it was last October. She was clothed with the sun, which was down here, and the moon was beneath her feet. Now, this is one of the Decan constellations of Bethulah. Now, there are 12 major constellations in the heavens. They are called the 12 signs. And each sign has also 4 Decan constellations to go with it, which further define the meaning of the constellation. Now here we have the woman Coma. The Greeks turned her into Bernice's hair, but this is the ancient picture from the Dendera Zodiac, goes back about 2000 BC, from the Temple of Esna. And this is the woman and child. And this is the desired, this means the desired or longed for. He's the desired of all nations. This represents when the Magi came to a house about 1 year and 3 months after the Messiah was born, they found the child in the house, the young child, with the woman, with the mother. But this represents the desired and longed for. The desired of all nations shall come, out of Haggai 2:7. There's written, the desire of all nations shall come, speaking of the Messiah. Now here we have the constellation Centaurus, which means the despised sin offering. And he has a word, the star Telamon, and in this area here, I'm going to show you a different picture of this in a moment. That means the heretofore and the hereafter. Telamon is the heretofore and the hereafter, as in Revelation 1:8, who was and who is to come. So this is speaking about, this is what this star means. And below him you have the Southern Cross. And the Hebrew name Centaurus, because the one who was born of the woman, that's the major theme was the birth. Now he's seen here as despised sin offering. And it means the Hebrew name for the constellation is not Centaurus, it's Beza, which means the despised. As written in Hebrew 53:3, it is written, he is despised, Basa, and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him, and was despised, Basa, and we esteemed him not. The other name of this is Asmiath, which means a sin offering, Isaiah 53:10. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He hath put him to grief when thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin. He shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. So that's the main meaning, or biblical meaning of this constellation. Now here's a picture of Centaur or Basra of the Temple of Dendera. Again, this goes back to 2000 BC. This is actually a lithograph taken from the bronze plate in the early 1800s. Francis Rosen had bought this lithograph. The King of France got this bronze plate out of Egypt, out of the Temple of Esna. or the Temple of Dendera, excuse me. Now, the Temple of Dendera goes back to about 100 BC, but the plate itself goes back to about 2000 BC that they found. Because you can tell where the vernal equinox, they had it in Taurus, so you can tell by where the vernal equinox was, the dating of the plate. So this is a picture of the, if they had this backwards, it should be facing the other way. Some of the pictures from this the plate from the Temple of Dendera, they have backwards, some they have forwards. This is actually the woman over here. Where am I going over here? This is the woman Bethulah from their rendition of her. But over here we have Centaurus. This is a man because he has a tail. Or some women can have a tail. That means which cometh. If something has a tail on it in their constellations, it means which cometh. So he is the one which cometh. And he has a head of a calf or a lamb, because he was the lamb, the one to be sacrificed. And above him here is the lamb also, and he's holding the staff. Well, we're going to do this picture over. We're not going to have the man horse. We're not going to put the head of a cow on him either. That's sort of like Egyptian gods, their gods and goddesses had the bodies of men and heads of cows. I'm not comfortable with doing that. So what we're doing is we're turning them around the other way, because that's where it's supposed to be turned. And we're going to put a staff on, give him a staff, and it's going to have the head of the lamb on the staff. So I think that would be the better way to go with that. I mean, we're trying to get back to the original pictures, but want it to be biblically correct also. And so it takes a lot to think these things through. But so we're going to change that to that when we get to that point. But from Francis Rollston's Mazzaroth, Centaurus, the appointed offering himself as a sacrifice. That's what this means, this constellation. A human figure with a tail, which means this cometh, and with the head of a calf or lamb of sacrifice. The Egyptian name is Namu or Mu, to die. The appointed dieth is bruised. The noetic roots traced by the Hebrew means appointed, established to die. So this is all talking about the Messiah. So he was born of the woman. He had the promise of the woman to come, and he is appointed to death. This is what this all constellation is speaking about. But the main theme is on the birth. Then we come to Bootes. This is another Decan constellation, the Bethulah, and this is he has a sickle in his hand here. It's like the harvest at the end of the world. The man with a sickle is spoken of in Revelation. And I keep on hitting the wrong button here or something. And we're going to put a staff here, because originally this has a staff, because he's a watcher of the sheepfolds. This is Bootes, the coming one. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud. And upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle, and reap, for the time of the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he sat on the cloud, thrust in the sickle in the earth, and it was reaped. So this is talking about he cometh. This is the Messiah coming back to the earth. This is the second coming. So we see this is Arcturus, which means he cometh. The Hebrew root, the Greek name of Bootes is bo, to come, meaning the coming. Psalm 96:13 is written, for he cometh bo, it says it twice, to judge the earth. He shall judge the world with righteousness and the people with truth. This is where we get the word from Psalms, this word bo. That's Bootes. So we see in Bethulah, we see his birth. Then we see he is appointed to die as a sin offering. Then he's coming back to judge the earth in righteousness. So you see all three, his first coming and second coming in this constellation. But still, the main theme of the constellation is about his birth, which we will see later when we get into what was going on when Messiah was born, later this afternoon. Now the next Decan sign, the second one, is Libra. And this is actually the constellation sign for the tribe of Levi. And it has some main stars. It has Zubin el-Janubi, then was Zubin el-Shamali, and Zubin Akrab. Zubin el-Janubi means the price which is deficient. Zubin el-Shamali, which is the star up here, means the price which covers. He paid the price which covers. This star down here, Zubin Akrab, means the price of the conflict, because he's going in conflict against the adversary, and he is wounded. And he pays that price. He pays the price for our redemption. Now the sign Libra is the Redeemer's, this is what the main theme of Libra is the Redeemer's atoning work, or the price deficient balanced by the price which covers. This is the price deficient by the balance of the price which covers. The Hebrew name is Mozanim, excuse me. It means the scales or weighing, like we are weighed in the balances and found wanting, hopefully not. Similar to that. The Arabic name is El Zubina, which means purchase or redemption. And I went through the star Zubin El Janubi, which means the purchase or price which is deficient, and the star Zubin El Shamali, which means the price which covers. And Zubin El Akrab again, which is the price of the conflict. So this is the main theme of the sign of Libra, or the Hebrew name is Mazzaroth. Now this is the Decan constellation in the sign of Libra is the Southern Cross, or the crux, or the cross. This at one time was visible in the northern hemisphere. At the time of the Messiah, when he was born, when he was crucified, you could see this looking south. It rose highest in the sky in the evening. It was not very far above the horizon, but you could see it. And I'll be getting into this a little bit later when we show some things, but this is called the cross. Now, about 100 years after the Messiah was crucified, this cross disappeared because of the precessional movement of the earth. It spins like a top. It's on like a 27,000-year cycle. One spin is 27,000 years. And it brings some of these constellations, like from the southern or the northern hemisphere, if they're near the horizon, at their highest point, they go below that after a while and disappear. So it disappeared about 100 years after the Messiah was crucified. It's not to be seen again for probably another 6,000 or 7,000 years in the northern hemisphere. Now, it speaks about this. The Hebrew name for this is Adom, which means, in this case, cutting off. Adom can mean red also, a man. But in this case, it means cutting off. As in Daniel 9:26, it speaks of it there. The temple of Dendera, this is represented as a lion with his tongue hanging out of his mouth, as if in thirst, and a female figure handing a cup out to him. Under his 4 feet is a hieroglyphic symbol of running water. They don't have the cross there, but something different. What is all this but the Lion of the tribe of Judah, brought down unto the dust of the earth, and saying, I am poured out like water. My strength is dried up, from Psalms 22:13 through 18. I thirst, John 19:28. And in my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink, Psalm 69:21. The Egyptian name for this lion, however, points to its ultimate triumph, for it is called Sarah, which is victory. So the Messiah had his victory. Now this is from the Denderan Zodiac, which Bullinger was referring to there. And here is a lion with his tongue hanging out. He is backwards, though he should be facing the other way, and the woman's coming in from the front. Pretty sure that's how it would go. And this is the woman that cometh. She's got the cup of water here, and this is the hieroglyphic here for the waters being poured forth. This is a hieroglyphic for pouring forth waters. They have this instead of the Southern Cross there. Either one works there because he was a sacrifice on the cross, or he was a sacrificed here also. He's a lion of the tribe of Judah. Now here we have the constellation Lupus. Here it looks like a wolf or a dog. It means the victim slain. This is the victim slain. This is all again with Libra, which is talking about the altar of sacrifice, etc. Now the Hebrew name for this is the Seta, to be slain. The ancient zodiac of Dendera, he is pictured as a little child with his finger on his lips, and he is called Sura, not S-E-R-A, but S-U-R-A, Sura, a lamb. This is from the Denderan. He was brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth, speaking about the Messiah, when he was brought before his accusers. So this is called the lamb. This is the original, and this is the picture from the Denderan. I can't see his finger against his mouth here, but this is sort of I had to really blow this up and to scan it, and slowly lost some quality from it, but to get it to this size. But this is the Sura from the Denderan. And this is the crown, corona of the crown, glory. This also belongs to Libra. And here you see the serpent's tongue from serpents. I'll get into this a little bit later. But he's trying to steal the crown, but he's not successful at it. So, oops, sound effects here. This is the crown bestowed. That's what corona, this main theme is. And here we have Alphika, which is the main star of this crown, which means the shining. And in Hebrews, the name of this crown is Atara, the royal crown. In Hebrews 2:9, we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, and by the grace of God should taste death for every man. So again, speaking about the crucifixion. And this is the place where he was crucified, all to do with Libra. And James 1:2, blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive a crown of life, and which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. The serpent is trying to steal our crowns too, so be sure he doesn't, be careful he doesn't steal it on you. But going back to Libra, at one time, the picture of Libra, in the most ancient form, was a circle. It was actually an altar. It was an altar of sacrifice, or a holy mound. So it represents the altar of sacrifice and the holy mound, such as the Temple Mount. And that was its original form. But all those constellation pictures that we saw with Libra has to do with Messiah and his crucifixion, the price he paid for us, the redemption that he had paid for us. And he became the Lamb of the slaughter, and then he was crowned with glory when he fulfilled all that he had to fulfill at that time. Then he became crowned with glory. This is a third sign. Let me go back on this one. This is the third sign of the Mazzaroth, and it's the sign of Scorpio, the scorpion. The sign Scorpio means the Redeemer's conflict. And the Hebrew name for this constellation is Akrab, the conflict or war. And we see here above him, without beginning to Ophiuchus in a minute, is the man struggling with the serpent, but his one foot is coming down on the head of the serpent here. And his other foot is the point of the stinger. I can't bring my mouse, there we go. The stinger of this scorpion is poised to strike his foot here. So this is the wounding of the Messiah's foot, but him coming down and crushing the serpent or the scorpion's head. This is again out of Genesis 3:15. In the Coptic is Cepheus, which means the attack of the enemy or oppression. And the main star, and you can see here the scorpion's stinger poised to strike the foot, and this other foot coming down, crushing the head. And here is Antares, which means the wounding. Oops, went too fast here. This is the star, the main star is a red star in Scorpion, and it means the wounding. This is the wounding of the enemy. Antares in the ancient names from the Roman actually means rival of Mars. Aries is the name of Mars in the Roman time. The ancient Roman name for Mars was Aries. And it is Michael who goes up against the enemy throughout the scriptures. You see him in the Old Testament going up against Satan or Satan. And you also see him in the book of Revelation going up against Satan and Satan. So Antares is rival of Mars, and it's a red star. Now this is the close-up picture of Rho Ophiuchi. That means it belongs to Ophiuchus, the foot coming down, and the star Antares, which is the red star in the scorpion. So his foot's coming down on the scorpion, and you can see like a wounding here with the colors. This is Ophiuchus, and this is Antares, the foot coming down on the heart of the enemy. It's called the wounding. This is a close-up picture looking through a telescope of Antares. You see the red all around it, like oozing blood almost, you know. And so you see this bright blue star coming down upon it. I'll go to the previous one for a minute. But all these stars through here are the foot coming down. This is Antares. And Rho Ophiuchi is right in this area here. The foot's a little higher here. The foot can actually come down to this point here because all these stars belong to Ophiuchus. So the foot can't come down further with his heel here, his foot pointed out this way. Now here's the Decan constellation, the first Decan constellation of Antares, or of the Scorpio. And it's called Ophiuchus and Serpent. There's actually two Decan constellations. You have the man and you have the serpent. So these are the two Decan constellations, and he's struggling with a serpent. The Greek name Ophiuchus is from the Hebrew and Arabic Aphiacus, which means a serpent held. He is a man struggling with a serpent. And so this is a serpent held. And Razalhags in his head, the star, means head of him who holds. And you have Unuk, which is encompassing Elia the accursed. This is the accursed serpent. He had to crawl on his belly, remember, from Genesis. This is Cheleb, or Cheleb. It means the serpent enfolding. And then the third decan constellation for Scorpio is Hercules, the mighty vanquisher. But in the Hebrew, it is Marsik, which means the wounding. And then Dendera Zodiac, his name is Bao, who cometh. Hercules was the Greek name, but in the original names it means the wounding. And you see him holding some adders in his hand here with a club to strike the adders. And his other foot here, which you can't see below it, he's actually coming down on the head of the dragon. I'll show you this when we get to the constellation Draco. But his head is actually coming down on the head of the dragon, and his other foot is up here wounded. This foot is wounded, this foot's coming down on the head of the dragon, and he has serpents, and then on his head he has a lion's whelp. So this is a lion's whelp which he killed, and he's wearing that on his head. Here we have Alsgethi, which means the head of him who bruises. So he's the one who bruises. Here he is bruising the enemy, the serpent and the dragon. Here we have Corniforus, which means the branch kneeling. The branch is him, the Messiah, again identifying with the Messiah as the branch. He's the mighty vanquisher. And this is Marsik, the wounding. In Psalms 91:13, it says, "Thou shalt tread upon the lion and the adder. The young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample underfoot." So he's got the lion's whelp on his head. He's got the adders in his hand about to strike, and his other foot's coming down the dragon in this picture. This is right out of Psalms 91:13. "Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder. The young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample underfoot." Now we come to the fourth sign of the Mazzaroth, and actually Scorpio, which I forgot to mention, Scorpio is a sign for Dan, the tribe of Dan. And Sagittarius is a sign for Asher. This is what we're going into now. This is the fourth sign, which means the main theme of this is the Redeemer's triumph. This is the writing, this is what this means is, and in thy message, Psalms 45, 4-5. I was getting lost here, now I'm found here. "And in thy majesty ride prosperously because of truth and meekness and righteousness. And thy hand shall teach thee terrible things. Thine arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies, whereby the people fall under thee." This is all Psalms 45. Actually, this arrow here is pointed at the heart of the scorpion, and Taurus is pointed right at it. So his arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies. So the king's enemies is the scorpion. And we see other star names in the constellation. The constellation name is actually in Hebrew is Keith, the archer. Arabic is Al-Qas, the arrow. Akkadian is Nunki, prince of the earth. Star names in the Hebrew are Name, the gracious one. Nehushta, the going and sending forth. And an Arabic star name is Rukba Rami, the riding of the bowman. And one of the constellation decan signs to this sign is Lyra, the harp. This is praise prepared before the conqueror. The man on the horse is going forth to conquer. This is praise prepared for the conqueror. After this harp is the eagle and the harp. And Vega is the brightest star in this constellation, and that means he shall be exalted, speaking of the Messiah. He shall be exalted. Now, Shaluk means an eagle. He shall be exalted, and Shaluk means an eagle. And Sulafat means ascending, an eagle ascending. He shall be exalted, an eagle ascending. There's praise given, prepared for the conqueror. And it is written in Psalms 21, 1, 8, and 10-13. I took this all the scriptures here. "The king shall rejoice in thy strength, O Lord, and in thy salvation how greatly shall thou rejoice. Thine hand shall find out all thine enemies. Thy right hand shall find out all that hate thee. Their fruit shall thou destroy from the earth, and their seed from among the children of men. For they intended evil against thee. They imagined a mischievous device which they are not able to perform. Therefore shalt thou make them turn their back. when thou shalt make ready thine arrows upon thy strings against the face of them. Be thou exalted, Lord. Here we go with the harp, in thine own strength. So will we sing and praise thy power. So speaking about the man with the arrows and the praise given forth before the conqueror out of the book of Psalms. And that's what these constellations represent from the written word. So you can see how they go together. This is another decan constellation of Sagittarius, and this era, the author. And this altar is upside down, and its flames are touching the earth. This is like an altar of wrath. And it means consuming fire for his enemies. That's the main theme of this constellation, is the consuming fire for his enemies. The Arabic is El Mugamra, the completing or finishing. And the pertinent scriptures to this constellation, Psalms 21:9, thou shalt make them as a fiery oven in the time of thine anger. The Lord shall swallow them up in his wrath, and the fire shall devour them. This is all Psalm 21:9. Then out of the book of Revelation, chapter 8, verse 6 and 8 through 9, and the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar. So there's the fire with the altar, and cast it to the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. And the second angel sounded, and as it were a great mountain burning with fire was cast to the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of the creatures that were on the sea that had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. So this is referring also to this altar. This is what this altar represents. You see this in the book of Revelation. You also see it in the book of Psalms. So that's where you find it in the written scriptures. And you have the picture of it in the heavens. Now we come to the other decan constellation. I think this is the third one of Sagittarius. And we have Draco the dragon. And the main theme of this is the old serpent or devil cast down from heaven. He's seen upside down, casting down into the earth. The Hebrew name for this is Darak, which means to tread. The Greek is Draco, trodden on, because up here you see the foot of Hercules over his head. Never forget here. This is Thuban, which means the subtle, because he's the subtle. That's the star. And Rastaban is the star here, which means the head of the subtle. And you see the foot of Hercules coming down on the head of the dragon. And actually, in direct line with Rastaban, the head of the subtle. And the pertinent scriptures are Psalm 74, 12 through 14. For God is my king of old working salvation in the midst of the earth. Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces. This is also known as Leviathan, Draco. He's the crooked serpent in the sky mentioned in Job. So he breaks the heads. Hercules' foot is coming down on his head. And that day the Lord, with his sword and great and strong sword, shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea, out of Isaiah. This is speaking of this Leviathan is represented by the dragon. It is also represented by another constellation we'll be getting to a little bit later, which is Cetus, the beast from the sea. But this has always been known as Leviathan out of the book of Job, that crooked serpent. So that's what this picture represents in the scriptures and in the heavens. Now we're coming to the fifth decan constellation sign, which is Capricornus, which is the tribal sign for Naphtali. This main theme of this constellation is the goat of atonement slain for the redeemed, speaking about Messiah. And the main star is El Gedi or El Jedi. You can pronounce it either way. It's G-E-D-I. And it means the goat or the goat. And the actual Hebrew name for this is Gedi or Jedi. And in his tail, it means the kid or goat. And in his tail, it shows Deneb here, but that's Deneb El Jedi. Deneb, again, is in the tail. Remember, the Egyptian tails were that which cometh. And that's what this means. Deneb El Jedi means the sacrifice cometh, because the goat is the sacrifice, and he cometh. So he did come, and there's a sacrifice. So now we are waiting for the return of the Jedi. The true Jedi. But it is the goat of atonement slain for the redeemed. That's the main theme of this constellation. And the Passover lamb was either a goat or a sheep, if you recall, from the scriptures. But this is the goat of atonement. It's also we had the goat of atonement. And that was Messiah. And again, Deneb el Jedi means the sacrifice cometh. So I'm laying the foundation of these stars this morning, and you're going to be seeing these constellations, and it's quite a bit to go through. But when we go to this afternoon, we're going to be talking about the signs that are going on in them. You have an idea of what they mean. And if you don't have an idea what the constellations mean, it's hard to understand when you see the signs that are occurring in them, what's actually going on there. So this gives depth to what they mean. And you can see it in the scriptures. Now these are the 3 decan constellations of the Jedi, or the Gedi, the goat, Capricorn. Sagittarius is Sham in the Hebrew, which means destroying or desolate. That's this arrow. This arrow is actually sent forth from God, sent forth from the Father. But it strikes the Son. He takes the punishment upon himself. He takes that arrow that we should have taken, we should have gotten. He takes that punishment on himself for us. That's what he did for us. This arrow was pointed at us and the other decan constellation is Aquila, which means Tarared, the wounding. He is wounded. Here's an eagle falling. So this is Messiah as an eagle falling to the earth. Then we have Delphinus, which is this constellation, which is Delph. It means pouring out water. And also the dolphin represents resurrection. So we have the crucifixion and the resurrection in these constellations. This is Sagitta, the arrow of God sent forth. Aquila, the smitten one falling. And Delphinus, the dead one rising again. That's what these 3 decan constellations represent. Altair is the main star in Aquila. It means the wounding. He was wounded. Now we're going to the next decan constellation, or the next sign, which is Aquarius. This is the sign Aquarius. And this is the tribal sign for the Reuben. Now the Hebrew name of Aquarius is Deli, or the water urn. Now there's an easy way to remember the Hebrew name on this. His name is Deli. It's an easy way to remember what tribe it goes with, because where else would you get a good Reuben except in the Hebrew Deli? So, so that's one way you can remember this. How the Reuben and Deli are concerned. So here we have the Deli, the water urn, and some constellations just have the water urn here, and the ancient Dendera is a guy holding 2 flasks of water, pouring them to the earth. But this is Deli, the water urn, and Arabic is Delu. The star. This means the main theme of this sign is their blessings ensured, or the living waters of blessing poured forth to the redeemed. So this is God's blessings poured forth. This is what the main theme of this constellation is the Almighty's blessings poured forth to the redeemed. And here we see a fish down here, Pisces australis, and the fish represents his people. I'll be getting this in a little bit. When we get into the sign Pisces, you have 2 fish in Pisces. They represent both Judah and Ephraim. And it says in the scriptures they'll come together and be as one, like as when the Holy Spirit was given on Pentecost, both Ephraim and Judah were together. And this fish here is twice as big as those 2 fish, which means those two are together. And they're receiving the blessings of Yahweh Elohim. I'll be getting into that later, but I wanted to share this while we had this picture up here, because you see this fish here is twice the size as those 2 fishes, and that means that all 12 tribes of Israel are together when they received the Holy Spirit, spoke in tongues. There were many people there from all over, from many nations at that time after the Lord's crucifixion on that day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit was brought down. But that's what his blessings were poured forth at that time. And the star is... Gosh, what was his name of the star? I forgot what it was. Sadhu San? I can't read it here. But I forgot the name of it. I can't remember them all, I guess. It means the blessings bestowed. That's what this star means. It means the blessings bestowed. And down here we have Formalhaut, which is the fish. Oh, that's the blessings bestowed, excuse me. I don't know why I put this up here for. Here it is down here. El Samek means the record of the pouring forth. That's what it is. Sa'id el-Malik. is the record of the pouring forth. That's what this star means here. And the star and the fish, and actually near the fish's mouth, means the blessings bestowed, because he received the blessings, the people. Fish represent multitudes. That's what they represent. And Israel was multitudes. That's the sand of the sea, as stars in the heavens. There are multitudes. So these were the multitudes. The fish represent multitudes. There are multitudes receiving the blessings. And it is written in Numbers 24:7, referring to this constellation of Aquarius or Delhi, he shall pour the water out of his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters, and his king shall be higher than the Gog, and his kingdom shall be exalted. So this is where you get the scriptures for this constellation. He shall pour water out of his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. In many waters, like fish and multitudes. The fish live in the waters. Now, one of the main decan constellations of this is Pegasus. And the Hebrew name for this horse, it's a horse with wings flying in the sky, is Pekah or Pega. And it means the chief. And sus is horse. So Pegasus means the chief horse. That's what this means. And this means the blessings coming quickly. Blessings are being poured forth from the one thing, but these blessings are coming quickly. That's what the main theme of this is, because he's coming on the horse. The main star in this constellation is a bright star called Markab. And Markab means returning from afar. Isn't that Messiah returning from afar to pour forth blessings quickly on his people? Another star name is Shiat, which means who goeth and returneth, speaking of Messiah again. This is the chief horse. This is Messiah's horse. Because it is written in Revelation 19:11, and I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat on him was faithful and true, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. He's coming back on the horse, and he's followed with the saints who are on horses too, but this is the chief horse. The chief horse belongs to Messiah. Another decan constellation in Aquarius is Saturn, who returns as in a circle. The blesser surely returning. That's the main theme on this. That's the Hebrew name of it is Saturn, which who returns as in a circle. This is Deneb, which means the judge. That's the main star of this constellation of Cygnus, the swan. The other one is Farfaj, which means the glory is shining forth. Anyway, that's the decan constellation of Aquarius. So it shows the blessings being forth, blessings surely coming, the blessings swiftly coming, and he's returning from afar. Now this is the next sign is the sign of Pisces. And in the Dendera Zodiac, it's called Pico Orion, or Pisces Hori, which means the fishes of him who cometh. In the Hebrew, it is named Dagim, the fishes. This represents the people of Elohim, the Almighty. These are the people of him who cometh. Now, I'll be getting into these a little bit later. I'll be showing how these represent the tribes of Israel, the two houses. This one represents the 10 northern tribes, or Ephraim, and this one represents Judah and Benjamin, the two other tribes. And I will show you how I come to that in a little bit. But the main theme of this is the blessings of the redeemed in abeyance. They are bound to see this. They're bound by bands, but they are bound to see this, who is the beast from the sea. Whenever certain celestial events, as we get into this later, occur, that represent whenever Israel is going into bondage or coming out of bondage, like the Exodus or when they were going into the captivities, there were celestial signs occurring in this constellation. And I'll be getting into that later, because it's talking about their captivity or release from captivity. And you see over here the Lamb, his arm is coming out to break the bands, to break their captivity. The band is Al-Risha, which means the redeemed bound, but binding their enemy. They are bound, but the enemy is going to be bound. Now, the Dagim, the fishes, is closely connected with multitudes. In Genesis 48:16, Jacob blesses Joseph's sons and says, "Let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." The margin in the King James Version says, in Hebrew, is as fishes do increase. So it's talking about the multitudes as fishes do increase. It's a figure that is used. The band, it means Israel is now bound. The great enemy still oppresses, but deliverance is sure. Aries the ram is seen with his paws on this band as though about to loosen the bands and set the captives free and to fast bind their great oppressor. This is all Bollinger's book, The Witness of the Stars, 1893. Now, the Christians use the sign of the fish in the early days. They use the sign of the fish, or they use the sign of the anchor. You don't find the cross used at all in the first 300 years. In the catacombs, when the Christians were buried and stuff, they always had the signs of anchors, which means the anchor of her soul. And they also use the sign of the fish. You never see a cross for some reason, because, well, the cross at that time, many people were wearing a cross to Mithra. And the Christians did not want to in any way be associated with Mithra. I'm not saying the cross is a bad thing to wear, but they didn't want to be associated with the Mithra worshippers. And so their signs that they wore were anchors, which represents the Messiah is the anchor of our soul, and the fish. And from the Witness of the Stars on page 96 and 97, it says, indeed, this sign of Pisces has always been interpreted of Israel. So it's always been interpreted of Israel. Both Jews and Gentiles have agreed on this. Aberbanel, a Jewish commentator writing on Daniel, affirms that the sign Pisces always refers to the people of Israel. He gives 5 reasons for this belief, and so affirms that the conjunction of the planets Jupiter and Saturn always betokens a crisis in Israel. That's not necessarily true. We'll be getting to this a little bit later. But because such a conjunction took place in his day, 1480, he looked for the coming Messiah. Actually, this conjunction did take place 3 years before the Messiah was born. It was Saturn, and it was actually not just Saturn and Jupiter, but Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars occurred in the sign Pisces. But it doesn't necessarily have to occur in the sign Pisces. But this is what happened 3 years before the birth of the Messiah, and again 3 years before the birth of Moses, the same sign occurred, but in the constellation Taurus, which we'll be getting into later. This is a Decan constellation of Pisces. This is the chained woman. This means they're redeemed in their bondage and affliction. The Hebrew name for this is Surah, the chained. You see her chained here. So she is in bondage and affliction. The star names are El-Pharatz, the broken down. I don't know if I have those up here. I said El-Pharatz, which means the broken down. Mirak, which means the weak. El-Amak, which means struck down. Adhil, which means the afflicted. And Mizar, which means the bound. So she's bound and afflicted. And this happened to Israel a number of times. This is what this constellation represents. And this is interesting. I took the constellation Pisces and placed it over the ancient maps of the Mideast or the Middle East area. And I just took Pisces, I did a transparency of it, put it on the map. This is the way it fell. I didn't enlarge it or anything. It's interesting. Here you have down here, you have Jerusalem and Joppa. But you see this fish here goes to the north. And this fish here goes over to the east. It was in 722 BC that the 10 northern tribes were taken into bondage up to Aprad. They went through Hamath and Aprad, then to Haran. Then they went over to Nineveh and Calah and they were dispersed into these areas here. They were first taken north in this way. And it was in 586 BC that the tribe of Judah and Benjamin were taken over to Babylon. This fish is laid right over top of Babylon. So you have the 2 captivities. You have the 10 tribes that were taken captive to the north, and you also have the tribes of 100 some odd years later, to 586 BC, they were taken over towards Babylon. It's interesting how this fish falls on top of both of them. And so I don't know if the prophets knew it. This fish was seen in the temple of Dendera as Pisces 2000 BC, which is a long time before any of the captivities. If the prophets knew about these things, I don't know. But it's interesting that how they do represent the captivities of Israel, and they're bound here, and they're taken into Babylon. They're taken to the north. I found that to be kind of interesting how it laid out on the map like that. That's why I say that one represents the 10 tribes, the other represents Judah. This is Ephraim and Judah. That's what they represent. In the tribal symbols, you have the 12 signs of the constellation. When you come to the Temple of Solomon, you have only 2 animals in there. There's a lion and there's the bull. Now the lion represents Judah and the bull represents Ephraim or Joseph and Manasseh, but it represents also the 10 tribes. Now Isaiah 51:21, 52:3 is written, "Hear now this, thou afflicted, awake, awake. Awake, awake. Put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem. Shake thyself from the dust. Arise and sit down, O Jerusalem. Loose thyself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion, represented by Andromeda. For thus saith the Lord, ye have sold yourself for naught, and ye shall be redeemed without money. This is speaking about the captive daughter of Jerusalem, which is portrayed in Pisces and Andromeda. She's bound. Another decan constellation for Pisces is Cepheus. This is the Greek name, and this is the enthroned king. He has a scepter in his hand here, and here's the bride next to him over here. The star in her shoulder, Alduramin, means coming quickly. Alfurk means the Redeemer. So it says the Redeemer, it says the Messiah. Many people in their cultures say they were a Redeemer and got to the in past, but there's only one Redeemer we know that to fulfill all these things, and that's Jesus Christ, Yahshua HaMashiach, or Yeshua. Arai is who bruises or breaks. He breaks the kings of the enemy. And we'll be getting into this later on, but this is the North Star under his foot, and all things revolve around this star. This is where the North Star is now, so all things revolve under his feet. I'll show you this later on when we get to the second session. But this is who bruises or breaks. This is the enthroned king representing Messiah, Jesus Christ, Yahshua, when he's enthroned. Now, Cepheus means the crowned king, the Redeemer coming to rule. And Dendera Zodiac, that means Pekuhor, which this one cometh to rule. The Greek name by which he is known is Cepheus, is from the Hebrew and means the branch. Again, here we have the branch. And it's called Euripides the king. At the same time, saith the Lord, will I be a God of all the families of Israel, and they shall be my people. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. So he was the father of all of Israel. He is the king. Some of his promises here. I'm looking forward to these promises coming to pass fully. We have a lot now, but we have a lot more coming. The next sign we're going to is the sign of Aries, which is the ram or lamb. This is a tribal symbol for Gad, for the tribe of Gad. Now, in the Hebrew, the name of this constellation is Telah, or Teleh, the lamb. The star El Nath, the main theme of this constellation is the blessings of the redeemed, consummated and enjoyed. The main star El Nath means wounded or slain. El Sheraton, the second one, means the bruised, the wounded. And Masatan means the bound, because he was taken away bound from the Mount of Olives. He was taken away bound to face his accusers. And he was bruised. And he was wounded and slain. But this one here is different than the goat of atonement, which we saw in Capricorn. This is the Messiah coming back, the one, as we see this in Revelation, so I get into a little bit, but you see his arm going forth and breaking the bands. But this is one who was slain, who paid the price, who is coming back with thousands of his saints to deliver his people. And we see this here in Revelation 5, 8 through 9. This is a picture of this ram here, of this lamb. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 4 and 20 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by the blood out of every kindred, by thy blood, out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation. This is what this ram or lamb represents. He's coming back to redeem because he's worthy, because he took that upon himself. By his blood, he's redeemed us. So now this constellation here is about the return of Messiah. This sign here, you're going to see this in Revelation 19 and 20. When he comes back with thousands of saints, you have the marriage supper of the Lamb at that time, and the beast from the sea is cast into the sea. And we're going to see through the decan constellations. That's what this section of the heavens represent, Revelation 19 and 20. And this part of Revelation also. First, he has to open the seals and the books. And so this is a decan constellation. We're going to put clothes on her, in our rendition of her. Here she hasn't got any clothes on the top. But this means the enthroned woman, Cassiopeia. It also represents the bride. This means the captive delivered. This is the Andromeda, we see her captive. Here we see her delivered. This is the captive delivered and preparing for her husband, the Redeemer. Here she's combing her hair. She's making herself ready, as written in Revelation 19. She's making herself ready. And she's wearing fine white linen, white and clean. This is the linen, fine linen, white and clean. this is an ancient picture that goes back well before Messiah came. But this is what this represents. And so she's making herself ready. And this name is Shadar, which means the freed. Actually, Shadar in Hebrew also means breast. This is her breast, and that means a certain nourishment. That has a certain meaning to it. And Kaf, which means the branch. In Revelation 19, 7 through 9, it is written, "Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage supper of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready." She's seen her making, this is the picture that's just setting forth here. She's combing her hair, making herself ready. And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And he said unto me, "Right blessed are they which are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he saith unto me, These things are the true sayings of God." And that's what this picture represents. She's making herself ready, and she's wearing the white linen, fine and clean. This is the scripture that represents the main script theme. Another decan constellation of Aries is, we're going to get into this one a little later, big time, is Perseus, but the Hebrew name is Peretz, the breaker delivering the redeemed. He's the one who delivers. This represents Messiah. And you see him here holding a head in his hand. It's a severed head. And the name of the head in the Hebrew is Rosh Satan, which means the head of Satan. Now, this represents Messiah coming down to take the beast out, but this was foreshadowed by Goliath, and David and Goliath. When David took Goliath out, he took Goliath's head and took his sword and took his head off and held it up in the air, according to the book of Samuel. And so this is represented by David, but it's also representative of Messiah when he comes back to take out the beast. Because Goliath was another beast that came up against Israel, at that time. And Messiah would we're going to be getting into this more this afternoon. We're going to show some heavy signs that were going on recently that in the late 90s, there were some signs going on in here that are just awesome. And we'll be getting into those this afternoon. And one name, the star name is Merfak, which means who helps. El Janib, which means who carries away. And as again, the head in his hand is named Rosh Satan, the head of Satan. This star here, the bright star, head of Satan. And this bright star here is El Go, which means in Arabic, the ghoul. He's kind of a ghoulish guy, wherever he is. That means the ghoul, the head of Satan and the ghoul. He's watched this thing when I was a kid called The Ghouls. But this guy, in Transylvania thing, but this is Peretz, it means the breaker, again. In Revelation 19, this is our Revelation 19, 11 through 21, parts of it. "And I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. Then he that sat on him was faithful and true, and righteousness doth he judge and make war. And he was clothed in the vesture, dipped in blood. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean." This is the bride. "And I saw the beast, and the kings of the earth, and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. And the beast was taken with him, and the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceedeth out of his mouth." I think the blood dipped on his vesture, his blood in his vesture was the blood of his enemies. In Greek mythology, remember this time Pegasus, the chief horse, belongs to the Messiah. In the Greek mythology, Pegasus belongs to Perseus, which is this constellation here, Peretz in Hebrew. So I think that you see some, even through the perversions, we see that this horse and this man goes together. He's coming back on this white horse, and this is all part of Revelation 19, 11, and 21. So this whole, again, we're in the latter part of Revelation when the final conflict on earth is going on until the 1,000 years pass. Past this, when he comes back in after 1,000 years, but for a little bit when the adversary kicks his heels up and is finally destroyed. But this is after the revelation period of after the tribulation, and we've got this big battle going on. And this is the other decan constellation of the sign Aries, and this is Cetus, the sea monster. This is sort of a goofy picture of him. I got better ones in the presentation I'm going to do tonight, but this means the main theme of this is the great enemy bound. The main star is Menkar, and it means the bound or chained enemy. There's another star, Dipta, which means overthrown or thrust down, and Mira in his neck means the rebel. So this represents the beast from the sea, as we see in Revelation. It talks about him in Revelation 13. You start seeing about the beast. He's the beast from the sea. See this, the sea monster. And we see this in Revelation 21 through 3. So you see all these constellations, decking signs of Aries are all about the events of Revelation 19 and 20. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and the great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed a little season. So we have this main star and this beast, this snout, is Menkar, and it means the bound or chained enemy. And this is what this picture, you see this picture here with this scripture. Now we come to the constellation of Taurus, and the sign of Taurus, and this is the tribal sign of Joseph. And the Hebrew name of this constellation is Shur, it means coming and ruling. This is Messiah, actually it represents Messiah, the coming judge of all the earth. And the stars, Aldebaran means leader. Aldebaran in his eye means the leader or governor. Elnath means, this is not in the horn, this is actually in the foot of Auriga, and I'll be getting into this later on, is the wounded or slain. And we have the cluster of the Pleiades, which is the congregation of the judge or ruler. And the Syriac is called Sukkot. That's what this is called, is Sukkot. This area here, the Hyades, are called the Sukkot. Now this picture, in ancient times, this is not a picture of a bull or a water buffalo. In ancient times, there was an animal called a reem. This is what this is fashioned after. Now a reem was a huge creature. I think the last one was hunted and killed by Julius or Augustus Caesar. I forget which one now, but they killed the last one. And they were a huge animal. They had large horns that came out of their head. They're a little bit smaller than the elephant, so they're really big. And in ancient writings, they always called them, when they were doing the mythology of these things, they were always shown as snow white, very white. They were snow white. And so we had like snow white here. Now the star Aldebaran, which is in his eye, is a red star. It's like a flame. And so we see it in the book of Revelation in chapter 1, it talks about John when he is in front of Messiah, the coming judge. He has white, here is white as snow, and his eyes is a flame of fire. And also in his right hand, he is holding the 7 stars of the 7 churches, of the 7 angels. It represents the 7 angels of 7 churches, and that's what these groupings here are the Pleiades. And they've always been known as the 7 sisters, but here they represent the 7 angels of the 7 churches. This is the congregation of the judge. So you see all this from Revelation chapter 1 in this animal here. Now the reem was full, when it got going, when it got mad and it started moving forth, nothing could stop it. It just tore down everything in its sight. This is like the wrath of God being poured forth. At this time, this represents is the wrath of God being poured forth, and nothing can stop it. Nothing can stand in this way. It just runs right through everything. And what is unique about this, when we get to Auriga, you see his horns going through the foot of the shepherd here. And this shepherd here represents Messiah. This represents Messiah, the coming judge of the earth, and this also is. But this represents the wrath of God, and this represents Messiah taking that wrath upon himself for his people. And I'm going to get this more later on. I just wanted to show you this neat little picture of it here. But we're going to get into this much more later. And because this is my favorite constellation, Auriga, because of this. I'm going to get a little more detail. Now, Deuteronomy 33:17, we see the firstling of his bullock, Margin, his firstling bullock, majesty is his, and his horns are the horns of a wild ox, reem. Of King James, it should be reem. With them he shall push or gore the peoples, all of them, even the ends of the earth. And they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. They shall push the peoples to all the ends of the earth, and then Manasseh and Ephraim shall inhabit the ends of the earth, according to this scripture. They shall push the thousands of Manasseh and Ephraim. So the 2 horns are the horns. This is representative of Joseph, the tribal symbol, and the 2 horns are Ephraim and Manasseh. Good night.